Thanks so
Hey, Emma,
much.
how's it going?
Good. How's your day going so far?
Pretty great. I'm
Yeah,
I'm uh, I'm new to all this press stuff. It's fun talking to people about the movie.
I mean, and it's such a great movie. I have to say how much I really, really loved it. It's so beautiful and it's touching and it's funny. And I love how it looks at kind of what makes a community, but also at found family and grief and love and all of those things, but in this tiny, tiniest of packages. Um, so I wanted to kind of start by asking you why you thought now was a good time to bring Marcel's Tiny Adventures to the big screen.
Um, well, I didn't think that because we started making the movie 7 years ago, if
Okay,
you can believe it.
fair enough.
But it was always a character, Jenny and I had made a few shorts and we were sort of stunned that he took off on the internet this way and had kind of touched so many people. And and we thought about making a movie back then, but we sort of I didn't know how to make that movie, and we were getting a lot of sort of studio interest from all the big Hollywood studios about how to sort of how to kind of graft Marcel onto a more familiar like tentpole franchise sort of thing, and
Right.
it just wasn't right for us, and we knew this character so well that I just felt like we're just gonna have to make it independently, and so that it does take quite a while longer when you have to when you have to make something independently, but I'm so glad that we did because it was the right process, and I think we found the right story for him.
Well,
By
and
the way,
when,
your flowers are beautiful. Are those
oh, thank
ranunculus?
you. They're the secret, they're fake. Because
Oh,
I
they're
kill every plant that I own. So I need to, I should try playing them the classical music like Marcel and
that's
Nanikani
right.
do. That's a good idea. And actually that's something else I wanted to ask you about, which is music in the film and how it seems really important to Marcel. He sings. He talks about the music teacher that he misses. It seems to be kind of a bonding piece between him and Nanikani, and they play the music for the plants. What do you think kind of music represents to him and that community? And how did you kind of pick, especially the pivotal song, the Peaceful, Easy Feeling at the end? How did you go about kind of choosing for that moment?
Wow, that's a great question. Music was always really important to me and to the film. I mean, it's important in probably any director that's making something because your job as a director, sometimes the hardest thing as a director is to try to connect yourself. You're on set, it's sweaty, everyone's hungry, blah, blah, blah. And to try to connect yourself to the conditions that an audience is going to be watching it in, because you're in this totally different context and everyone's stressed out, and you have to say to yourself like, okay, sit back. What is this moment in the movie to someone who's like sitting there in a theater watching it? And music helps you do that because it's very emotional. I think music hits us on a totally different kind of subtextual level, and you can stay connected to it. You can listen to that even while you're directing. And so I had the animatic, which is like the movie but just with storyboards. That had a lot of music in it already because and so I was sort of afforded the luxury of being able to listen to a lot of those songs, not the final score, but some of the music that inspired it, and there's a couple of tracks that we did license that are in the film, and to be able to listen to that and to direct to that and to have that emotion and that music be your guide is incredibly helpful. So it was always a big part of it. The Peaceful Easy Feeling, I want to say that Jenny came up with that idea to use that song as a it's a testament to what a beautiful performance she gives as well. Because if you listen to the lyrics to that song, it's like kind of sexy, and it's kind of like it's definitely written for a lover or a former lover.
Absolutely, yes.
but we cut out the verse where he's talking about I think like laying in the desert naked or something.
Yes.
And and it's such a it's just such a beautiful recollection and tribute to a friend that you've lost. And I love that it's such an unexpected funeral song.
It really is. It's a song I loved beforehand, but now I'm never going to think about it the same way. And you're right. Part of it is Jenny's performance in that moment and making it so genuine and touching.
You know what's so interesting that I discovered about that moment when we were in the sound mix is that one of the first things you do in a sound mix, or your sound mixer or designer will do, is to take out the noisy frequencies, because like there's like, you know, an air conditioner or something's making noise.
Right.
And so he did that pass on that track, and I couldn't, I'm not even sure that it was like sub-perceptual, but watching it through, I was like, something's wrong with this. It doesn't have the emotional content anymore. And he was like, oh, I isolated like this one tiny band of frequencies. And he's like, does that make a difference? So you put it back in, and it's like all of them, somehow it's so much more moving.
Wow.
Just that tiny, it's like the really high frequency, and maybe it's where his voice cracks. Maybe I associate it with, you know, pain or something, but it was so remarkable how what a big difference it made in the emotion of that, the impact of that moment.
And such a little thing
Yeah.
to make such a, and such, although I guess that's par for the course with Marcel, little things making a big difference.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting looking at the world through Marcel's eyes. It kind of makes everybody more curious, want to be a little bit more creative, a little more grateful for those connections that you find. And you have spent so much time with him over the years. You've been with him just over 10 years, I guess, and doing things in the movie took 7 years, as you say. But what have you learned kind of from the way he sees the world? Have you taken something away from, he's so unique in the way he sees things?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel inspired by him all the time. But I think that to take a macro view of like what is inspirational to me about him, and probably why he resonates with a lot of people, is that he's like you're saying, he's a little thing that is making do in a world that wasn't made for him. And we can all sort of relate to that from being kids, but then I think a lot of us think we're going to grow out of that, and then we become adults and we're like, oh crap, I still don't, it still feels like this world isn't made for me, but just for more complex reasons. And he doesn't wallow in that. He's not indulgent about pitying himself. He almost never pities himself. He sort of, when he is hit with those obstacles, he just kind of overcomes them, and he understands that it's not personal. It's not personal, it's inevitable, and he's going to overcome them just like he did the one yesterday, and just like he'll have to overcome the one tomorrow. And to not see the impossibility when you're confronted with a massive obstacle, I think is an inspiration we can all use sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. And he does have, I mean, there's emotional obstacles, obviously, but then he also has to deal with the actual physical obstacles of, as you say, a world that's not made for him.
Yeah.
And the world that you've created, though, it's really vivid, and it's so fascinating to watch the detailed pieces of it. And I know that you had to basically create that world twice, both kind of for filming and then for the animation process. What was kind of the most challenging part of that? And what was the kind of the biggest things that you needed to overcome to be able to tell the story that you wanted to tell?
I think that the biggest challenge in that process was, from the very beginning, I knew that I wanted it to be real stop motion. And I also wanted it to feel like a real documentary. I have almost never seen a mockumentary. I don't even like that word, because it kind of suggests to people that you're going to be mocking your characters or the format or something. And I'd never really seen a fictional or scripted documentary that actually portrayed its subject with dignity and didn't laugh at him, but laughed with him. And so I was really committed to this idea of like, I want it to feel like a real documentary, but also there's this stop motion character community world that and stop motion is kind of the total opposite of any sort of spontaneity, because it's so labor intensive, it's so rigid, yet it has to all be locked down. It's like I mean, when you shoot stop motion, when you go to a stop motion studio, literally they super glue the tripod to the ground, so that if anyone bumps it, it doesn't ruin the entire shot. And so that was I would say one of the bigger creative and technical challenges, is marrying those two things and doing stop motion in a way that gives the illusion of being off the cuff and authentically documentary. And a lot of our creative conversations and a lot of the challenges that we faced were in the name of getting that right. not sure if I answered your question, but
No, yeah,
I forget what it was.
No, you absolutely did. But it also reminds me, I was watching another interview of yours where you talked about being a perfectionist in the prep and then kind of an opportunist once it came to actually starting to film. And I wondered if there were any kind of moments that you remember that where you were able to kind of not improvise in the exact form, but something that you did come up with after the perfectionist prep was over that you were able to bring to the screen once you had
one of my crowning achievements of, I guess I was saying that not just for this film, but for anything I've directed, you have to be a perfectionist with the prep so that you really know what you want. You're going to be, as a director, you're asked a question every second, and then an opportunist when you're on set, because you have to acknowledge that you can't control everything, and maybe a better idea is going to pop up. For example, one of my favorite, my crowning achievement as a director who's trying to embrace the moment was in the interview with Leslie Stahl, that bit where Marcel's going on and on about how he doesn't do the clock the way that you do, and talking about how much he misses his family, and then Leslie Stahl sort of cutting right to the chase just says, "Dean, do you know how long?" And I'm just answer flatly, 2 years. That came about because Leslie had asked, Jenny was there on set that day so we could like film a real interview with Marcel and Leslie Stahl. And so
Gotcha.
Leslie, just following her instinct, asked Marcel how long it had been, and Jenny, extemporaneously came up with, this beautiful explanation or whatever. And then we kept filming other stuff, and I was like, I just saw the moment in my head and was like, hey, sorry, can we go back and just record, just like do that? And Leslie just asked me like how long it's been, and it and so it's like one of my favorite moments in the movie, but it never would have happened if I was trying to stick directly to the script that we had written or whatever.
Well, and it's such a great moment too, because then Marcel also reacts to it, which is like, oh, that's good to know. Yeah, I didn't realize that. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Well, and I was curious, was the idea always for you to kind of step up from behind the camera and to be included in the film, or did that come through kind of working through ideas and thinking what would work?
It came about a little later in the process. It was always in the pitch that my character would have his own subplot, and that he was a divorced filmmaker who's looking for apartments. But I don't consider myself an actor at all, and I don't really like being on camera, and so I really tried to resist being on camera. But my producers were absolutely right in twisting my arm, and just I had to acknowledge that they were right, that in order for that character to self-actualize and come out from his shell, no pun intended, that he had to put down the camera, which is his defense mechanism, and join Marcel in life as a friend and not merely a documentarian.
Well, you did a very good job. It seemed flawless. It was I think it really helps give that kind of other perspective. Also the perspective, just the size perspective.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time today. I really, really appreciate it. It was such a great film. Thank you for that as well, because I really, really
thank you.
Just beautiful.
Thank you, Emma. This is so fun.